we are here looking at a shoe, and it's a very special shoe. Tell me more about it.
Allbirds was founded 7 years ago as a B Corp with the environment enshrined in our governance, with a focus on leveraging natural materials to make footwear in a better way. And this is the result of 7 years of innovation in materials, and it's what we believe to be the world's first net zero shoe that we launched yesterday at the Global Fashion Summit in Copenhagen. So it's a very proud achievement for a small, young company.
Now, net zero or carbon neutral, these are terms that are being increasingly used. Obviously, today we are talking at a time when the UK government is being criticized for not being able to stay on track of its own net zero goals. But earlier in the day, we heard about greenwashing claims. The Advertising Standards Agency here is going after companies that are claiming carbon neutral, but then cannot back up those claims. Most of the time, those claims are tied to buying offsets, and that's where they fall apart. Because these offsets, where you pay somebody to remove the carbon dioxide for you, don't always work. You are not using offsets.
Well, there's a lot in what you've just said there.
Yes.
Having just arrived in London today and just zooming back to pick up The Guardian and to see net zero on the cover, and knowing that when we founded the business 7 years ago, even the word sustainability was used infrequently. And fast forward today, it's generally acknowledged as the problem of our generation, but we have an issue around language. Even a word like sustainability means 100 different things to 100 different people. If I asked people in the audience to define this, they might talk about air quality, water quality, they might talk about biodiversity, animal welfare, and we'd all be very confused and probably want to stay in bed. And really, what we need to do is zoom in on a framework. And part of that is regulation.
Yes.
Part of that is conversations like this, and I know you've got lots of opinions on this particular topic as one of the leading voices in the media about it. And part of it is rallying around a strategy, because many of those aspects of sustainability are important, but to go after all of them at the same time is to sometimes have conflicting incentives.
Right.
Carbon is our North Star as a business. Which is not to say all the other aspects of sustainability don't matter, but much like calories on food, which is not the totality of a healthy diet, it's a very, very important metric that connects me to you, Bloomberg to Allbirds, the United Kingdom to New Zealand, and all that is up to a number that we need to work together to reduce. Allbirds has been able to boil that down to an on-product carbon footprint, and then work really, really hard to reduce that. And we've done that not with offsets, but with innovation around materials, a dedication to measure and then innovate around the products that we're making. And it's multiple years of effort, and it's one shoe, and quite frankly, it's a good start, but it's not enough.
So a lot of the shoe is made up of wool. You can probably see it from the distance. And the claim around it being carbon neutral is that it is carbon negative wool. Now, what does that mean?
Well, it's a combination of materials, not just the wool. What's interesting as a designer and an innovator is that when you start to apply the lens of carbon to the way that products are created, they start to look different in the same way that an electric car, freed from the constraints of a combustion engine, starts to take on a different form. And so too do these objects. Shoes starting to take on a different form as we leverage and use what is 3 carbon negative materials, which are the foundation of this product. One of them is wool. We've worked very, very closely with our partners in New Zealand called New Zealand Merino. They're an incredibly innovative company that represents 532 farms, 15% of New Zealand's agricultural land mass, just coming out of the Copenhagen Fashion Summit. That's half the size of Denmark, so it's an extraordinary massive land. 2 years ago, none of them wanted to engage with the topic of regenerative agriculture, and now they've signed up en masse because there's increasing consumer demand for lower carbon fibre product from across the fashion industry. And we've been able to leverage that. The fibre in this product is from one particular farm called Lake Hawea Station, somewhat biased, but it's the most beautiful corner of the world. And this farm has worked really, really hard to measure out the gate and consider every aspect of the farm and the ecosystem within the property, with all the biodiversity and various aspects of how the property works to create fibre that is carbon negative, that allows us to create a net zero product.
And the negative part is coming from the carbon being stored on the activities that are being done on the farm.
Correct. Yeah. What we might call within the process of how the farm is run and operated, the cover crops, the way that the fibre is created. So it looks at the whole ecosystem out the gate. Saying wool is a little bit like saying cars. There's a lot of difference between the way that the fibre is produced and how the land is cared for, trees, foliage, how every aspect of the ecosystem of the farm is considered. And this is really, we believe, the future of how we're going to start to create lower carbon products, is to look at each of these properties and incentivize the type of farming behavior that will allow us to make lower carbon products.
Now, you are not just doing a carbon neutral shoe here based on the calculations which you've put out for people to look at, including the design and the details. Do you want others to copy the shoe?
I think I think it's essential. This is a category that makes something like 20 billion pairs of shoes a year. We're one of the few, if not the only, company that consistently labels their products with their carbon footprint. The whole foundation of this Moonshot program, which is really the pinnacle of our innovation effort, is that this suite of materials, this methodology, is open source and available to everyone. So we launched a quite comprehensive, what we're calling a toolkit recipe book for how this shoe was made, with a view that other people will download it, use it, adopt it. I think one of the keys to lower carbon products and innovation broadly in the sector is ushering in a new era of hyper collaboration, of working together, and we hope that this will be a catalyst for doing just that.
And by 2030, you say you're going to be a near zero company on carbon emissions. So every shoe is then going to be a carbon neutral shoe by 2030 for you.
I would just like to thank you for reading in its entirety the 25-page release, which I don't think very few people have done. So yes, as part of our broader environmental plan is a company strategy around the environment and around carbon, which we call the Flight Plan. So we measure our entirety of our carbon footprint, and we have a plan that we're on track to deliver a reduction of 50% by 2025, and then as close to zero as we can possibly get by 2030. And there's a lot of factors, as you know, to being able to deliver against that, but we're working very, very hard. And it's something that we believe is really the future of the fashion industry and how we will evaluate the products and services that we use every day. That carbon footprints will become a part of the vernacular, as I mentioned, like calories on food. It will become a unifying metric that will help to allow us to make better choices in the way that we consume, because at the moment the landscape is confusing. I think consumers have a very, very strong intent to do the right thing, but in the best of ways, you can't walk down the high street, whether it be in San Francisco, Copenhagen, Auckland, or even in London, without brands making different claims about what they're doing and what is the right thing. So I think we welcome that discussion and debate, and that, quite frankly, that regulation around this.
Now, I think we should note the irony of the fact that we've been talking about an Allbirds shoe that's made from all sheep.
Mm-hmm.
And so with what you're trying to do, having published the recipe book, have big shoe companies come to you and said, we'd like to collaborate and we'd like to take on this idea? And how are they going to scale if it's going to come from this one farm where you're getting this carbon negative wool from?
Well, yes, and we've already worked with Adidas. We launched a shoe a year and a half ago that was 2.94 kilograms of carbon, give or take half a hamburger. It was one of the first times that two competing footwear companies had worked together. And then on the back of this, the answer is yes. I think what I find every day, and sometimes the fashion industry gets a bad rep, but I hear and I see incredible intent, particularly within the creative and design communities, to make better products, to find solutions. But it's a complicated landscape, again, with this behemoth of a topic, which sometimes doesn't always allow entry points in for people. And so hopefully this is an example of making this easier, making it accessible, and hopefully an invitation for others to come and join us.
So next time people eat a hamburger, the one thing, if you want to take something away from this conversation, is that hamburger was twice the shoe that an Allbirds company shoe makes. Not this one, because this is carbon neutral, right?
This one's zero. I hope you take more away from that from this conversation. But it does make a larger point, and particularly this is fresh in my mind coming out of what is really the pinnacle event on the fashion calendar around this topic in Copenhagen, that we need to align on a simpler way of discussing this. I think when you hear a word like sustainability, not only are you confused as to what exactly it means, you also, through the lens of the consumer, you assume something is more expensive and less good. So I think we need to continue to make sure in this conversation we're speaking the language, as we have done to farmers, of economic opportunity, of products that, much like a Tesla, isn't electric and environmentally friendly. It's fast and good looking and gets you from A to B in style. And we need to be comfortable, particularly in the context of fashion, talking about creating objects of desire at the same time that we're deeply discussing the tenets of sustainability.
Now, we're here at the Sustainable Business Summit, and that word sustainable can mean multiple things, right? It's sustainability on the environment, but it's sustaining a business. You launched the company as a Kickstarter back in 2016. It was very popular. One of my colleagues who was in San Francisco said she couldn't walk by without seeing an Allbirds shoe when she was reporting from San Francisco a few years ago. You had an IPO in 2021 with $1 billion valuation. That was about $26 stock price at the high. Now it's $1.30. What happened?
It's a complicated world, and we have come a long way in a short space of time, as you mentioned, from a Kickstarter campaign and a video that was filmed on a family friend's sheep farm for $700 with the help of my brother not that long ago. And we're now playing, if you'll indulge me in a football metaphor, in the Premier League of business. And it's both a remarkable achievement to get this far, and equally we now need to prove that we can be a great public company. And I believe that we can. We're 7 years into what I think can be a 100-year journey to build the next generation help build the next generation of brands that are anchored in an environmental purpose, that can stop using the word sustainability because it's not tacked on to an existing infrastructure, but it's been there in the beginning and it's core to the strategy. I think we're at a really interesting moment where what I might term a say-do gap, not that I came up with that, but there is incredible intent, and we see it in our research and with our insights from the consumers to engage with brands that place the environment, climate change, carbon, sustainability at the heart of the way that they make products. And yet when they go to consume, when they go to the checkout, it often doesn't translate into action. And look, I think all this will change. I'm sure you've talked about it today. That consumer intent is there, and I think the businesses that prepare and get this right will win in the long run, and we've got work to do. We've got things to prove, but we're very, very early days in terms of our journey.
So you have a good product, you have sustainability attached to it, and you have a story to be able to tell with it. So what is it that's the problem? Is it declining sales? If they are declining sales, then how are you going to do more to be able to make sure that the business gets to the point of being able to play in the big league?
I disagree with one thing you said. I don't think sustainability is attached to it. I think sustainability is at the core of why the business was founded, because we believe we're on the cusp of a transformation in the category. For 50 years, we've been innovating in synthetic materials and plastic, and we're on the cusp through regenerative agriculture, consumer awareness, of a shift back to natural materials, of new ways of making and constructing products as we transform to a more sustainable economy. And we need to continue to remember, us and all brands, that people don't buy sustainable products, they buy great ones. I don't believe a product can be great today unless it's anchored in the tenets of sustainability, however you may define that. And I believe we have to execute really, really well. Again, a sustainable business needs to be a profitable one. I believe There is an enormous growth opportunity in the category for the ones that get it right, and we're uniquely positioned to take advantage of that, but we have to go prove that.
And as part of that, you've gone through a reorganization. You were co-CEO, now you're Chief Innovation Officer, your CFO stepped down. What exactly are you doing to get to the profitability? What are the steps that you have planned, apart from good products, which are core to being able to run a business?
Well, thank you for saying they're good products. I wish you were wearing them.
Well, they're not available in the market
yet. It'd be a little bit more credible.
I'll buy one when
it'd be a little bit more credible if you were wearing them. But I'll take it. As I said, it's a challenging world. We're a young company, and we are going through a steep learning curve as a recently public company that's been hit quite hard. The opportunity remains a big one. We need to execute incredibly well. We have an incredible team of people that are attracted to this idea and the need to do things differently, and we need to execute really, really well. It's interesting in the context of a word like sustainability as it ties to business strategy. What we find more often than not, almost all the time actually, as we work to improve our margin, is that sustainable initiatives and innovations are also margin improvements. They're also efficiencies. As we look to create lower carbon products, we need to look at the totality of how it's made, and that includes packaging, shipping, the density of how we ship and package our products, what we make those out of, how we reduce waste, how we limit weight. Every aspect of that goes into a carbon footprint calculation of a product. And more often than not, it's also about efficiency. So in the same way that we need to focus not on making sustainable products, but great ones, we also need to focus on building a sustainable and profitable business for the long term. And I don't think those two things are in conflict.
Well, and one place where one way to think about sustainability is to consume less. And so you do focus a lot on the end of life, on making sure that the pair of shoes lasts as long as it can. But that conflicts with sales, because if you're going to make a product that's going to last that long, then will people buy as many pairs of shoes? I mean, this is a famous problem that, tech companies have been called out for. Obsolescence that's planned into a product. Obviously, you're not trying to do that, but how do you play around the problem of consuming less and yet being more profitable?
Well, this conversation is happening in real time, but I'll tell you about something that happened that was famous. One of the iconic consumer brands of our time, Patagonia, in 2011, on Black Friday, took out an ad in the New York Times and it said,
buy a jacket?
Don't buy this jacket.
Yep.
It was provocative, profound, and yet we know that between now and then we've continued to buy a lot of jackets. Reducing how we consume, focusing on quality, they're all parts of the answer. They're not the total answer. We know that we're going to continue to buy T-shirts and shoes, and part of the challenge here is to engineer those products, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes from natural materials, and to make them with net zero impact, or as close as we possibly can to that. And we need to do both. And I think there's an enormous opportunity to do that and to do it well. I think people want ice cream in this moment. They want easy answers. I get asked a lot about recyclability and end of life. People want to take a pair of shoes, send them back to you, and imagine that they'll be taken apart and remade into something. And of course, it's not that easy, and it's extraordinarily complicated. Really, this is like Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday. This is a game of inches. It's about measurement. It's about innovation. It's about embedding sustainability in the strategy of your business, because you believe that in the future consumers will not think about net zero carbon as a nice to have, but as a necessity. And as we look, like on the cover of The Guardian today, to governments to inevitably get involved in this conversation to bring regulation and clarity and agreed upon standards to what is the wild, wild west of this particular topic at the moment. I think all of these dots will connect in the fullness of time.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks, everyone. And if you want to hear more of these conversations, please do listen to Zero. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.